The wind howled through the mountain pass with such fury that Callan Ingram could barely see his own hands as he stumbled through the knee-deep snow toward his cabin. And when he finally made out the dark shape slumped against his door, he thought at first it was a bear or some other creature seeking shelter, until he got close enough to see the green skin and the ice crystals coating her face. She was barely breathing, her lips tinged blue despite their natural pigmentation. And Callan did not hesitate even though every instinct honed by 2 decades of frontier living told him that an orc this close to human settlements meant trouble. He grabbed her under the arms and hauled her inside with a grunt of effort, surprised by how solid she felt despite being clearly malnourished. Once he had her on the floor near the cold hearth, he ran to light every fire in his cabin, the central fireplace first, then the smaller one in the sleeping alcove, and finally the iron stove he used for cooking. The cabin filled with smoke briefly before the chimneys drew properly, and Callan coughed as he stripped off his own snow-covered coat and boots before turning his attention to the unconscious orc woman. Her clothing was inadequate for the blizzard that had blown in unexpectedly that afternoon, just thin leather armor that was cracked and worn, offering no protection against the elements. Her fingers were white at the tips, a dangerous sign, and he quickly began removing her frozen garments with clinical efficiency born of necessity rather than impropriety. He had blankets warming by the fire and wrapped her in them, once he had her down to her underclothes, then began the careful work of warming her extremities. Too fast, and he could cause more damage. He knew that much from his years serving in the border militia before he had retired to this isolated life. He rubbed her hands gently between his own, breathing warm air onto her fingers, and watched as color slowly began to return to them. The orc woman was young, he realized, perhaps no more than 20 winters if he judged right, with the small tusks that protruded from her lower jaw marking her as female. Her dark hair was plaited in intricate braids that suggested someone had cared for her appearance before whatever misfortune had brought her to his doorstep. A scar ran along her left arm, old and well-healed, and he wondered what battles she had survived. It took nearly an hour before she stirred, a low moan escaping her lips as consciousness returned along with what must have been considerable pain. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion evident in their amber depths, and when they focused on Callan kneeling beside her, fear flashed across her face. "Easy," he said softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You were freezing to death at my door. I brought you inside." She tried to sit up, then gasped and fell back against the cushions he had piled behind her. Her hand went to her side and Callan saw her wince. "Are you injured?" he asked, moving closer despite the way she tensed. "Why did you help me?" Her voice was rough, whether from cold or disuse he could not tell, but her words were clear enough. "I am orc. I noticed," Callan said dryly. "Still seemed wrong to let you freeze." She stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign tongue, her expression unreadable. After a long moment, she carefully lifted the edge of her tunic to reveal a poorly bandaged wound on her ribs. The binding was soaked through with blood and something that looked like infection. Callan swore under his breath. "How long have you had that?" "4 days," she admitted. "Perhaps 5, I lost count." "What happened?" Her jaw tightened, and he saw the muscle work as she considered whether to answer. "My clan cast me out. I was hunted by humans who saw me on their land." One had a crossbow. The simple statement held a world of pain, and Callan found himself angry on her behalf even though he knew nothing of her circumstances. "I have medicines," he said, "if you will let me look at it properly." "Why?" she asked again, and he could hear the genuine bewilderment in her voice. "Why would you help me? Humans hate orcs. It is the way of things." Callan sat back on his heels and regarded her steadily. Maybe, but I am not going to let someone die in my home when I can prevent it. Hate does not extend that far, not for me. She held his gaze for a long moment, searching for deception or hidden motive, and he let her look. Finally, she gave a small nod, though her body remained tense. He gathered his supplies, the small chest of medicines and bandages he kept for emergencies, and a basin of water that had been warming by the fire. When he returned, she had managed to prop herself more upright against the wall, her green skin flushed darker across her cheeks from the effort and the returning warmth. "This will hurt," he warned as he carefully peeled away the old bandage. The wound beneath made him grimace. The crossbow bolt had caught her along the ribs, gouging a deep furrow that should have been stitched immediately. Instead, it had been left to fester, and the flesh around it was angry and swollen. "I have felt worse," she said through gritted teeth, as he cleaned the wound with water steeped in herbs his mother had taught him to use. "I am sure you have, but that does not mean this is pleasant." He worked as gently as he could, washing away the accumulated dirt and pus until he could see the extent of the damage. "This needs to be stitched, or it will keep opening." "Then stitch it." Her stoicism impressed him, though he wondered what kind of life taught someone to bear such pain without complaint. He threaded his needle with practiced hands, having sewn up enough injuries during his militia days that the motion came naturally. She did not make a sound as he worked, though he saw her hands clench white-knuckled in the blankets. "What is your name?" he asked, partly to distract her and partly because it seemed wrong to minister to her so intimately without even that basic knowledge. "Zurak," she said after a pause. "Of Clan Ironhide, though I suppose I have no clan now. Callan Ingram. Of no clan, just myself." He tied off the last stitch and began applying a poultice his mother had sworn by for preventing infection. "What did you do to be cast out?" She was quiet so long he thought she would not answer, but as he wrapped clean bandages around her ribs, she finally spoke. "I refused to kill a human child." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Callan secured the bandage and sat back, studying her face. "Your clan wanted you to kill a child. There was a raid. The child's parents fought and died. My battle sister would have killed the child too to leave no witnesses, but I stopped her. I carried the child back to the edge of human lands and left it where it would be found." Zurak's amber eyes met his, defiant despite her weakened state. "My clan said I had shown weakness, that I had betrayed our ways. They cast me out with only what I wore." "Then your clan are fools," Callan said bluntly. "There is no honor in killing children." Humans do not usually think orcs capable of honor at all. I am beginning to think humans do not know as much as they believe they do. He stood and moved to the stove where a pot of stew had been simmering before he went out into the storm. "You need to eat. When did you last have a proper meal?" "Before I was cast out. Nearly a week then, combined with the injury and exposure. No wonder she had collapsed." He ladled a generous portion into a bowl and brought it to her along with a spoon, watching as she took it with trembling hands that suggested how much the brief conversation had cost her remaining strength. She ate slowly, with obvious effort, and he saw her wince with each swallow. Fever, he thought, recognizing the signs. The infection had taken hold despite her constitution. He would need to keep the fever down and hope her body could fight off the worst of it. "When you finish, you should sleep," he said. "You can take the bed. I will make a pallet by the fire." "I cannot take your bed." "You can and will. You are injured and ill. I am not." He spoke in a tone that brooked no argument, the same one he had used as a sergeant when giving orders. "Sleep is part of the medicine." She looked as if she wanted to protest further but lacked the energy. Instead, She finished what she could of the stew and handed him back the bowl. He helped her to her feet and guided her to the sleeping alcove where his bed stood piled with furs and quilts. She sank into it with a sigh that spoke of bone-deep exhaustion. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one more time, her eyes already closing. "Truly." Callan pulled the heaviest quilt up over her and made sure she was tucked in against the cold. "Because it is the right thing to do. Sleep now. We can talk more when you are stronger." She was asleep before he finished speaking, her breathing evening out into the deeper rhythm of unconsciousness. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her and wondering what he had gotten himself into. Harboring an orc, even an outcast one, could bring him trouble if anyone found out. But the nearest neighbors were miles away, and with the blizzard showing no signs of stopping, no one would be traveling for days at least. He returned to the main room and built up the fires until the cabin was almost uncomfortably warm, knowing that heat would help fight the fever he expected would worsen before it improved. Then he made himself the promised pallet, though he slept lightly, waking several times through the night to check on his unexpected guest. The fever came as predicted, striking hard in the early morning hours. He woke to the sound of her thrashing in the bed, crying out in a language he did not understand. When he reached her side, she was burning up, her skin so hot he could feel it radiating through the blankets. Callan spent the next 3 days in a constant battle against the fever. He kept cool cloths on her forehead and wrists, coaxed water and medicinal teas between her lips when she was lucid enough to swallow, and changed the dressing on her wound twice daily. Sometimes she knew where she was, her amber eyes focusing on him with surprising clarity. Other times she was lost in delirium, speaking in her native tongue or calling out names he did not recognize. During one of her lucid periods on the second night, she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "If I die," she said hoarsely, "burn my body. Do not leave it for scavengers." "You are not going to die," he told her firmly. "The fever is breaking. You will recover. You cannot know that. I know that you are too stubborn to die in a stranger's bed after surviving being cast out and shot and nearly freezing. Your body is fighting. Give it time." Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. "You are strange for a human, so I have been told." She drifted back to sleep, and he returned to his vigil. Outside, the blizzard had finally blown itself out, leaving the world buried under several feet of snow that glittered brilliantly in the sunlight. Beautiful and deadly, like so many things in these mountains. On the morning of the 4th day, he woke to find Zurak sitting up in bed, her eyes clear and alert. The fever had broken during the night, leaving her weak but coherent. "How do you feel?" he asked, bringing her water and the porridge he had prepared. "Like I was trampled by a war horse," she admitted, accepting the bowl, "but alive, thanks to you. The infection responded to treatment. Your constitution did the rest." He sat in the chair he had pulled up beside the bed days ago. "You should be able to move around a bit today if you take it slowly. Movement will help you heal, but do not overdo it." She ate the porridge with better appetite than before, and he saw color returning to her face beyond the flush of fever. Her green skin had taken on a healthier tone, less ashen, and her eyes had lost the glazed look of illness. "I owe you a debt," she said when she finished eating. "A life debt." "In my clan that would mean you owe me nothing," Callan interrupted. "I did what anyone should do." "But most would not have. Most would have left me to die or killed me themselves." She set the bowl aside carefully. "You do not know me. You have no reason to trust me. Yet you saved my life and cared for me in my weakness. That is a debt that cannot be dismissed." He could see the seriousness in her expression and understood this was important to her culture, even if she had been cast out from it. Then, if you insist on owing me something, help me around the cabin once you are well enough. I have been alone here for 2 years, and there are always tasks that could use an extra pair of hands." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "This I can do, though I warn you I know little of human ways. And I know little of orc ways. We will learn together." Over the following week, Zurak grew steadily stronger. She moved around the cabin with increasing ease, though he noticed she favored her injured side and tired easily. He set her to simple tasks at first, mending torn clothing and helping prepare meals, and was surprised by her competence. Her stitches were neater than his, and she had knowledge of herbs and cooking methods he had never encountered. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked one evening as she prepared a dish using dried meat, roots, and spices from his stores. "My mother," she said, her voice softening with memory. "Before she died in a raid when I was young, she taught me much. She said a warrior who could not care for herself was only half useful. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. "My father, too, before grief took him a year after her death. He walked into the deep forest and did not return." She stirred the pot with steady movements. "My battle sister raised me after that. She was harder, more devoted to the warrior's path. I think she always resented having to care for me." "Is she the one who wanted to kill the child?" "Yes. She said I dishonored my parents' memory with my weakness. Perhaps she was right." Callan stood from where he had been oiling his boots and moved to stand across from her at the cooking table. "Listen to me, Zurak. Showing mercy is not weakness. Protecting the innocent is not dishonor. I have seen real dishonor, real cowardice. What you did took more courage than killing an unarmed child." She looked up at him, something vulnerable flickering in her amber eyes. "You truly believe that?" "I do." They held each other's gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and Callan felt something shift between them, subtle but undeniable. He looked away first, uncomfortable with the warmth that had bloomed in his chest. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Callan managed the heavier outdoor work, breaking paths through the snow to his small barn where he kept chickens and 2 goats, checking his trap lines, and ensuring they had sufficient firewood. Zurak took over most of the indoor tasks, cooking, mending, and organizing his supplies with an efficiency that made him realize how much he had been merely surviving rather than truly living. She was clever too, her mind quick and curious. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, sharing stories of their different lives. He told her about his time in the militia, the battles against orc raiders along the border, though he glossed over the worst of the violence. She told him about growing up in a clan always on the move, about the harsh beauty of orc culture with its emphasis on strength and honor. "You miss it?" he asked one night as they played a simple board game he had carved years ago to pass the winter hours. "Your clan, I mean." She was quiet, considering her move on the board. "I miss what I thought it was, the sense of belonging, of having a place in the world, but now I see it more clearly. There was little room for doubt or difference. You were born to a role and expected to fulfill it without question." She moved her piece and looked up at him. "Do you miss the militia?" "Sometimes. I miss the camaraderie, having brothers in arms, but I do not miss the killing." He made his counter move. "I saw too much death, dealt too much of it myself. When my service term ended, I took my land grant and came here to find peace." "Have you found it?" "More or less. It is a solitary life, but after years of noise and blood, the quiet suits me." "And now that quiet is disturbed by an orc in your home," she said with a hint of humor. "The cabin is certainly livelier," he admitted with a small smile. "Though I find I do not mind as much as I might have expected." She smiled back, a genuine expression that softened her features and made her tusks seem less intimidating and more simply part of who she was. He noticed for the first time that there were flecks of gold in her amber eyes, catching the firelight. Another week passed, and the snow began to melt in earnest as an early thaw arrived. Zurak was fully healed now, moving with the grace and strength natural to her kind. She began helping with the outdoor work as well, and Callan discovered she was far stronger than him when it came to tasks requiring brute force. She could carry twice the firewood he could manage, and she repaired a section of his barn wall that had been damaged in the storm with impressive efficiency. "Your people would make exceptional builders," he remarked, watching her work. "We are, when we settle long enough. But most clans prefer to remain mobile, raiding and moving on." She secured another beam in place. "I think it is part of why humans and orcs cannot find peace. You build and plant and claim land. We move and take and keep no territory. Different ways of living that clash." "Do you think peace is possible between our peoples?" She climbed down from the barn wall and dusted off her hands. "I do not know. There is too much history, too much blood on both sides, but perhaps—" She looked at him directly. "Perhaps it begins with moments like this. One orc and one human choosing to see each other as people rather than enemies. That seems almost too simple. The best truths usually are." They stood there in the weak winter sunlight, and Callan felt that shift again, stronger this time. He had grown accustomed to her presence, more than accustomed. He looked forward to their conversations, to hearing her perspective on things he had never questioned. She made him laugh with her dry observations about his attempts at cooking when she let him try. She challenged him in their evening games, proving to be a strategic thinker who won as often as she lost. More than that, he found her beautiful, not in spite of her differences but because of them. The green of her skin reminded him of new spring leaves. Her tusks gave her smile a unique character. The way she moved with unconscious strength fascinated him, and her eyes, those amber eyes, saw through to something deeper when she looked at him. He realized with a start that he was falling in love with her. The thought should have alarmed him. She was orc. He was human. It was forbidden by every law and custom of both their peoples. But standing there in the snow with the sun on his face and Zurak smiling at something one of the goats was doing, he found he did not care about laws or customs. "What are you thinking?" she asked, noticing his stare. "That I am glad the blizzard brought you to my door," he said honestly. Her expression softened, and he saw something in her eyes that mirrored his own feelings. "As am I, though I never expected to find kindness in human lands, certainly not from a former soldier." "Former soldiers can change. People can change if they choose to." "Yes," she said softly, "they can." The moment stretched between them, pregnant with possibility, but before either could speak further, a sound carried across the snow. Voices, distant but drawing closer. Human voices. Zurak tensed immediately, her hand going to her side where a weapon would have hung if she had one. Callan put a hand on her arm, feeling the muscles coiled tight beneath. "Go inside," he said quietly. "Stay out of sight. Let me see who it is. If there is trouble, there will not be. Trust me. Please." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded and moved quickly into the cabin, pulling the door shut behind her. Callan walked around to the front of his property and saw 3 men making their way up the path. 2 he recognized as neighbors from the nearest settlement 6 miles south. "Ingram," called the older of the 3, a grizzled farmer named Harold. "Did not expect to find you alive after that blizzard. Came to check on you." "I am well enough," Callan replied, keeping his voice level and friendly. "Cabin held strong and I had supplies enough." The 3 men reached him, breathing hard from the trek through melting snow. The third man, younger and unfamiliar, looked around with sharp eyes that made Callan immediately wary. "This is Marcus, Harold's nephew from the eastern settlements," explained the second man, Peter, who ran the trading post. "He is tracking an orc that was spotted in the area before the storm." Marcus stepped forward, his hand resting on the sword at his belt. "An orc woman, outcast or criminal by the look of her wounds. You have not seen anything." Callan felt his jaw tighten but kept his expression neutral. "I have been focused on surviving the cold, have not seen much of anything beyond my own property. Mind if we look around?" Marcus asked, though his tone suggested it was not really a question. "These orcs are dangerous, cannot be too careful." "I do mind, actually," Callan said firmly. "This is my land, and I do not take kindly to strangers searching it without cause." "The cause is an orc raider. She is no raider," Callan interrupted, then cursed himself for the slip. "I mean, you said she was wounded and outcast. Does not sound like much of a threat." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You know something." Harold stepped between them, holding up his hands. "Now then, let us not get heated. Callan, if you have seen this orc, you need to tell us, for your own safety if nothing else." Callan looked at the three men and made a decision that he knew could change his life irrevocably. "She is here. She came to my door during the blizzard, nearly dead from cold and wounds. I brought her inside and treated her injuries. She is no threat to anyone." "Are you insane?" Marcus exploded. "You harbored an orc. Do you know what the law says about that?" "I know what my conscience says about letting someone freeze to death on my doorstep," Callan shot back. "And I know that she has done nothing to warrant being hunted like an animal." "They are animals," Marcus spat. "Monsters. You are a fool if you think otherwise." "I am a fool who knows the difference between a person in need and a threat. She is the former, not the latter." Peter looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. "Callan, you know we respect you, but this puts us all in a difficult position. If word gets out that you are sheltering an orc." "Then word will get out," Callan said flatly. "I am not turning her over to be killed because people are too afraid to question their prejudices." "Where is she?" Marcus demanded, moving toward the cabin. Callan stepped into his path. "You will not go in there." "Get out of my way, old man. I am younger than I look, and I have spent 20 years learning how to fight." "Step back." For a moment violence hung in the air. Then Harold put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Easy, boy. This is not our fight, and Ingram has rights on his own land. He is breaking the law." "Maybe so, but that is for the magistrate to decide, not us." Harold looked at Callan with disappointment clear in his weathered face. "You are making a mistake, Callan. People will not understand this. I know, but it is my mistake to make." The three men left shortly after, Marcus still fuming and making threats about what would happen when authorities heard about this. Callan watched them go, his heart heavy with the knowledge that his peaceful isolation was now at an end. When he returned to the cabin, he found Zurak standing by the window, her face unreadable. "You should have let me go," she said. "You should have told them I left or that you had not seen me. Now you will face consequences for helping me." "I faced a choice between betraying you and standing by what I believe is right. I chose the latter." He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the melting snow. "I will not apologize for that. They will come back, with more men with weapons. They will force me to leave or try to kill me. Then we will deal with that when it happens." He turned to face her fully. "Zurak, I am not going to abandon you, not now." She met his eyes and he saw the conflict there, gratitude warring with fear and something else he could not quite name. "Why risk so much for me? We have known each other only weeks. Because in those weeks I have come to care for you, more than care for you if I am being honest." The words came out before he could second-guess them. "I do not want you to leave. I want you to stay here with me for as long as you will." Her eyes widened, genuine shock crossing her features. "You cannot mean that. I am orc. You are human. There is no future in such a thing." "There is if we make one." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was warm and rough with calluses from work and battle. "I know it would be difficult. I know we would face opposition from both our peoples. But I have been alone for 2 years, and in these few weeks with you, I have felt more alive than in all that time. You make me laugh. You challenge me. You see the world in ways I never considered, and when I look at you, I see someone brave and compassionate and strong, someone I could love if you would let me." Zurak stared at their joined hands, her breathing unsteady. "I do not know how to do this. I have never. Orcs do not court as humans do. We choose battle partners, strength matches. This, what you speak of, it is not something I was taught. Neither was I, really. I am making this up as I go." He squeezed her hand gently. "All I know is that I want to try if you want to as well." She looked up at him, and he saw tears gathering in her amber eyes. "I have been alone since my clan cast me out, lonelier than I have ever been, even before you found me. And here with you, I found not just safety but something more, a feeling I have no words for in your language or mine." She lifted her free hand and placed it against his chest, over his heart. "It frightens me, but yes, I want to try." Relief and joy flooded through him, and he could not help the broad smile that spread across his face. "Then we will figure it out together." She smiled back, tentative and wondering, and he slowly pulled her closer. She came willingly, and when he wrapped his arms around her, she rested her head against his shoulder. They stood there in the weak afternoon light, holding each other, and Callan felt something settle in his chest that he had not known was unsettled. But their peace was short-lived. Marcus returned 3 days later, and this time he brought 7 men with him, including the local magistrate, a stern man named Robert who held the legal authority over the scattered settlements in the region. Callan met them at his property line, with Zurak standing beside him despite his suggestion that she remain in the cabin. She had refused, saying she would not hide from what was coming. "Callan Ingram," Robert began formally, "you stand accused of harboring a dangerous orc in violation of territorial law. What say you?" "I say the law is wrong if it demands I let an innocent person die," Callan replied. "She has committed no crime, threatened no one. She came to me injured and freezing, and I gave her shelter. That is all." "All," Marcus sneered. "You defend a monster, stand with it against your own kind. That is treason." "She is not a monster. Her name is Zurak, and she is a person deserving of the same basic decency any of us would expect." Robert looked uncomfortable but pressed on. "The law is clear, Ingram. Orcs are enemy combatants. Providing aid to them is prohibited." "Then I am guilty and will face whatever consequences you deem appropriate, but I will not recant or apologize." "Nor will I leave willingly," Zurak spoke up, her voice carrying clearly across the snow. "If you wish to take me, you will have to fight for it, and I warn you, even injured and without proper weapons, I will not go easily." Several of the men shifted nervously at that, hands moving to their weapons. Marcus drew his sword with a metallic rasp. "Enough of this," he said. "We will take her by force if necessary and burn this place for harboring her. You will do no such thing." A new voice cut through the tension, and everyone turned to see Harold and Peter approaching, along with a dozen other settlers from the nearby communities. Harold walked to the front, his weathered face set in determined lines. "What is this, Harold?" Robert demanded. "You are here to support enforcement of the law." "I am here to say that maybe the law needs reconsidering," Harold said firmly. "I have thought much on this these past days. Callan Ingram is a good man, served honorably in the militia, and has never been anything but fair in his dealings. If he says this orc is no threat, I am inclined to believe him. You cannot be serious, Marcus sputtered. She is orc, and he is a man whose judgment I trust more than the judgment of someone I met 3 days ago, Harold shot back. I will not be part of killing an unarmed person or burning down a neighbor's home. Peter stepped forward as well. Nor I. This does not sit right. If she has done nothing wrong, we have no cause for violence. Other voices joined in, a murmur of agreement that grew louder. Not everyone supported them. Several men stood with Marcus, their faces hard with old hatreds. But enough sided with Harold that Robert found himself in the uncomfortable position of not having clear support for enforcement. The magistrate looked between the two groups, then at Callan and Zurak, and finally sighed deeply. This is a mess. I do not have the authority to overturn territorial law, but I also do not have the manpower to enforce it against this much opposition. He pointed at Callan. You understand the position you are putting us all in, I do, and I am sorry for that, but I will not change my choice. If she causes trouble, if there are any raids or attacks that can be traced to her presence, there will not be, Zurak interrupted. I have renounced raiding. I want only to live in peace. Robert studied her for a long moment. I must be losing my mind, he muttered. Fine. She can stay provisionally, but Ingram, you are responsible for her actions. Anything she does falls on you. And if anyone comes from the capital asking questions, I know nothing about this. Understood. Understood. Thank you, Robert. The magistrate shook his head and turned to leave, gesturing for his men to follow. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but Harold stepped into his path. Let it go, boy. This does not concern you. My uncle will hear from me later about your behavior. Now go. Marcus left, but the look he shot at Callan and Zurak promised this was not over. Still, the immediate crisis had passed, and as the crowd dispersed, several people stopped to speak with Callan. This is not acceptance, Harold warned quietly. Just tolerance. Do not push your luck. I know. Thank you for speaking up. Did it because it was right, not because I understand it. Harold glanced at Zurak, who stood slightly apart. But I remember you from the militia. Remember the kind of man you were. If you say she is good people, I will give her the benefit of doubt. After everyone had gone, Callan and Zurak returned to the cabin in silence. Once inside, she sank into a chair by the fire, her hands shaking slightly. That was closer than I would have liked, she admitted. But we survived it, and we have some people willing to defend your presence, at least enough to prevent immediate violence. He knelt beside her chair. Are you all right? I am. I do not know what I am, grateful, frightened, confused that humans would stand up for me. She looked at him. You have given up your peace for me. Your neighbors will always wonder now. Some will hate you for this choice. I know. But I meant what I said. I want you here. The rest we will manage. She reached out and cupped his face with her hand, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Probably both, he admitted with a slight smile. She laughed, a short, surprised sound, and then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, unfamiliar with the difference in their mouths, but Callan responded with gentle enthusiasm. Her lips were warm, and he could feel the smooth curve of her tusks against his face, strange but not unpleasant. When they pulled apart, both were breathing harder. I have wanted to do that for days, she confessed, as have I. He rested his forehead against hers. We will figure this out. All of it, together. Together, she agreed softly. The weeks that followed tested that promise. Word spread about the orc living with Callan Ingram, and reactions varied widely. Some people, like Harold and Peter, were willing to accept the situation even if they did not fully understand it. Others stayed away entirely, cutting off contact. A few made their hostility known, leaving threatening messages or making crude gestures when they passed his property. Worse were the nights when Zurak would wake from nightmares, reliving her casting out or the pain of wounds both physical and emotional. Callan learned to recognize the signs and would sit with her, holding her hand and talking quietly until the fear passed. "I am sorry," she said one night after a particularly bad dream. "I am a burden. You are not. We all carry scars, Zurak. Yours are just more recent." He brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. "Besides, you have held me through my own nightmares. We take care of each other." That is what this is. Is it always this hard, caring for someone? Sometimes, but it is also the best thing I have ever done. She smiled at that, and they settled back into the bed they now shared, her head on his chest and his arms around her. Despite the difficulties, moments like this made everything worthwhile. Spring arrived in full, bringing with it the season for planting and new growth. Callan worked his small plot of land with Zurak's help, and her strength made tasks that had taken him days into work completed in hours. She had a good instinct for the land as well, suggesting layouts and crop combinations he had not considered. "My mother's mother was a grower," she explained as they planted rows of vegetables. "Before the clan became primarily raiders, we had settlements. She taught my mother, who taught me, though I never thought to use the knowledge. Then we are both learning new things about ourselves," Callan said, marking another row. "I never thought I would be a farmer, but I find I enjoy it, watching things grow, tending them. It is the opposite of what I did in the militia, creating instead of destroying." Exactly. They worked in comfortable silence, and Callan found himself marveling at how natural this felt, as if they had been partners for years rather than months. She anticipated his needs as he did hers, a rhythm developing between them that spoke of deep compatibility. One evening, as they sat on the cabin steps watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple, Zurak spoke suddenly. In Orc culture, when two people wish to bond permanently, they exchange vows before the clan elders and share blood to seal the promise. Callan looked at her, his heart beginning to race. "Is that something you have been thinking about? I have no clan now, no elders to speak before. But I have thought about what it would mean to bind my life to yours permanently." She turned to face him fully. "In your culture, how do people show such commitment? We marry, exchange vows before witnesses, wear rings as symbols of the bond." He took her hand. "Zurak, are you asking? I am saying that I want what you spoke of weeks ago. A future together. I want to be your partner in all ways, not just in bed or work, but in life. I do not know your customs well enough to do this properly, but if you will have me, I would be yours and you would be mine." Joy surged through him, bright and overwhelming. "Yes, God, yes, I want nothing more." She smiled, brilliant and beautiful, and kissed him deeply. When they pulled apart, both were grinning like fools. "We should do it properly, though," Callan said. "I will speak to the traveling priest who comes through in summer. We will have a real ceremony. Will people come? Will they accept it? Some will. And those who do not, their loss. We will have witnesses who matter, people who support us." He stood and pulled her up with him. "Come on. We should celebrate." "How do humans celebrate?" "Well, traditionally there is a lot of drinking, but since we are alone, I think we can come up with our own traditions." They spent that night in joyful exploration of each other, learning the geography of different bodies and the universal language of love and desire. And in the early morning hours, wrapped in each other's arms, Callan felt more complete than he ever had in his life. Summer brought the traveling priest, a portly man named Father Duncan, who looked skeptical when Callan explained what he wanted. "You wish to marry an orc," he repeated, as if to make sure he had heard correctly. "I do." She is the woman I love, and I want to bind my life to hers in the eyes of God and law." Father Duncan removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, thinking, "I have been a priest for 30 years, and I have never been asked to do such a thing. I'm not certain it is even legal. The magistrate has allowed her to stay. She is recognized as a resident of this territory. That should be sufficient for a marriage. Should be, perhaps. But you understand the reaction this will cause." "I do. We both do, but we are asking anyway." The priest studied Callan for a long moment, then sighed. "Bring her to me. Let me speak with her." Callan fetched Zurak from where she had been waiting outside the small chapel tent Father Duncan erected in each settlement. She entered with her head high, refusing to show the nervousness Callan knew she felt. Father Duncan gestured for her to sit. "You are Zurak, I understand." "I am." "And you wish to marry this man by Christian rites, even though you are not of our faith." "I wish to bond with him in whatever way his culture requires. If that means your rituals, I will participate with respect and sincerity." "Why? Why choose this path? You could live with him without marriage. Why seek the blessing of a faith not your own?" Zurak was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because it matters to him, and what matters to him matters to me. Also because I have been cast out from my own people. To be welcomed into his, even in this small way, would mean everything." Father Duncan nodded slowly. "I see. And you, Callan, you understand that marriage is meant to be a lifelong commitment, that you will face difficulties many couples never encounter. I served in the militia for 20 years. I know about difficulty. This is different, but I am prepared for it." "Very well." The priest stood. "I will perform the ceremony, but I will not do it in secret. It must be public, with witnesses from the community. If you are to be married, it must be acknowledged openly." Callan felt relief wash through him. "Thank you, Father. Thank me after you see how many people come. I will spread word that the ceremony will be held in 1 week. We shall see what happens." That week was tense. Callan and Zurak prepared as best they could, making the cabin as presentable as possible and preparing food for guests they hoped would come. Zurak seemed more nervous than he had ever seen her, pacing and fidgeting. "What if no one comes?" she asked the night before the wedding. "What if they reject this completely? Then we will have each other and Father Duncan and the goats as witnesses. It will be enough." She laughed despite her worry. The goats as witnesses. That would be fitting for how strange all of this is. The day of the ceremony arrived clear and warm, perfect summer weather. Father Duncan set up near Callan's property, and as the appointed hour approached, people began to arrive. Not many, but more than Callan had dared hope. Harold came with his wife Martha, who brought a beautiful quilt as a wedding gift. Peter brought his family, and several other neighbors Callan knew by name if not well. There were perhaps 20 people gathered when Father Duncan began the ceremony, a modest crowd but enough to make it feel real and witnessed. Callan and Zurak stood before the priest, holding hands, and spoke the traditional vows of marriage. When it came time to exchange rings, Callan produced 2 simple bands he had commissioned from Peter, who did some metal work. As he slipped one onto Zurak's finger, his hand trembled slightly with emotion. "With this ring, I commit my life to yours," he said, the traditional words feeling more meaningful than he had imagined. "I will stand with you in joy and hardship, in peace and conflict from this day forward." Zurak repeated the words as she placed his ring on his finger, her voice steady despite the tears he could see gathering in her eyes. "With this ring, I commit my life to yours. I will stand with you in joy and hardship, in peace and conflict from this day forward. By the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife," Father Duncan said. "What God has joined, let no one separate." Callan pulled Zurak into his arms and kissed her soundly, to scattered applause and even a few cheers from the assembled witnesses. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. "We did it," she whispered. "We did. You are mine and I am yours, officially and publicly." The celebration after was modest but genuine. Martha's quilt was indeed beautiful, designed with geometric patterns in greens and golds. Other gifts were practical, tools and food and supplies that spoke of acceptance, or at least tolerance. People approached cautiously to congratulate them, and Callan watched as Zurak handled each interaction with grace and dignity that won over even the most skeptical. Harold pulled Callan aside at one point. "I will not lie and say I fully understand this, but I see how you look at each other. That is real, whatever else might be complicated about it. I wish you both happiness." "Thank you, Harold. That means more than you know." As the sun set and people began to drift away, Callan and Zurak stood together watching the last of the light fade from the sky. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "I never thought I would have this," she said softly. "A home, someone who chose me. A future that is mine to shape. Neither did I until you collapsed at my door during a blizzard. The best accident of my life. Mine too." They went inside as full darkness fell, closing the door on the outside world and its complications. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by love and vows and the simple human need for connection that transcended the boundaries of race and culture. The months following their marriage brought both joy and difficulty. Word spread beyond their immediate region, and reaction was mixed. Some praised Callan's courage, others condemned him as a traitor to humanity. A formal complaint was filed with the territorial governor, though it ultimately went nowhere since Zurak had committed no crimes, and the marriage was legally performed. More concerning were the threats. Twice, people came to their property with hostile intent, though Harold and a few others who had become genuine friends helped turn them away. Once, someone left a dead animal on their doorstep with a threatening message. Zurak wanted to respond with violence, but Callan convinced her that restraint was wiser. "We give them no excuse to act against us," he explained. "We live quietly, cause no trouble, and prove through our actions that their fears are baseless. It is hard to do nothing when threatened. I know. But trust me, this is the better path." She did trust him, and as time passed, the incidents decreased. People grew accustomed to seeing them together at the market, working their land, living their lives. They would never be fully accepted by everyone, but they carved out a space where they could exist in relative peace. The true test came when a group of orcs raided a settlement 15 miles away. The attack was brutal, leaving several dead and buildings burned. Immediately, suspicion turned to Zurak, with accusations that she had provided information or assistance to the raiders. The magistrate came himself this time, along with a dozen armed men. "Zurak, you are under suspicion for aiding in the recent raid. You will need to come with us for questioning." "She was here with me the entire time," Callan said, stepping between his wife and the magistrate. "She had nothing to do with any raid." "You would say that regardless. We need to investigate properly." "Then investigate, search our property, question our neighbors." "You will find no evidence of wrongdoing because there is none." Robert looked uncomfortable but determined. "Even so, she must answer questions. Then ask them here in front of witnesses. I will not have her taken away and treated like a criminal." The standoff might have escalated, but Harold arrived with several others who had become allies. "Robert, this is foolishness. We have all seen them these past months. She goes nowhere without Callan, causes no trouble. There is no way she was involved. The timing is coincidence. Orcs raid. It is what they do. But not all orcs are the same, and this one has proven herself different. Robert deflated slightly. I have a duty to investigate. Then fulfill it here. Ask your questions, do your checks, but do not haul her off like a common criminal when she has done nothing to deserve it. In the end, Robert conducted his investigation on site. Neighbors confirmed that Zurak and Callan had been seen working their land on the day of the raid. No evidence of any contact with orc raiders was found. The magistrate left with apologies, though the damage to Zurak was clear in her quiet withdrawal that evening. They will always suspect me, she said as they lay in bed that night. Every raid, every attack, I will be the first they look to. Perhaps, but we will defend against it each time. And each time you are proven innocent, it becomes harder for them to make accusations. You are optimistic. I am realistic. Change is slow, but it does happen. Look how far we have come already. She turned to face him in the darkness. What if there comes a time when my presence truly does endanger you? What if I must leave to keep you safe? Then we leave together. Where you go, I go. That was the vow we made. Callan, no. We are bound, Zurak, in good times and bad. I will not abandon you, and I will not let you sacrifice yourself for some mistaken idea of protecting me. We are stronger together. She was quiet for a moment, then moved closer, tucking herself against him. I do not deserve you. Neither of us deserves the other. We are just fortunate enough to have found each other anyway. Autumn arrived, painting the mountains in brilliant colors. Callan and Zurak harvested their crops, pleased with the yield. They had enough food stored to last the winter with plenty to trade for other necessities. Working together had proven even more productive than Callan managing alone. One crisp October evening, Zurak made an announcement that stopped Callan in his tracks. I am with child. He stared at her, his mind struggling to process the words. You are, we are. Going to have a baby, yes. I am certain. The signs are clear. Joy and fear warred within him. A child was a blessing, something he had never really allowed himself to hope for. But a child of mixed blood, half human and half orc. What kind of life would that child have? As if reading his thoughts, Zurak continued. I know this complicates things. I know our child will face difficulties neither of us can fully protect them from. How do you feel about it? He asked, moving to take her hands. Frightened, hopeful, uncertain, all of it at once. She met his eyes. But I want this child, I want our family. So do I. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her tight. We will face whatever comes. Our child will be loved and protected and raised to be strong. That is what matters. She hugged him back just as fiercely. We should tell Father Duncan and Harold. They should know. Word of Zurak's pregnancy spread quickly, and reactions were predictably mixed. Some were horrified at the idea of a half-breed child. Others, including Martha and Harold, were genuinely happy for them. Martha even began knitting small clothes and blankets, declaring that every baby deserved a proper welcome. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Zurak sometimes struggled with the changes to her body. Callan did everything he could to ease her discomfort, taking on more of the physical labor and ensuring she ate well and rested sufficiently. Winter came again, nearly a full year since Zurak had first collapsed at his door. They spent the long, dark evenings by the fire, Callan reading aloud or telling stories, while Zurak worked on preparing supplies for the coming baby. Sometimes, she would take his hand and place it on her swelling belly so he could feel the child move, and each time it filled him with wonder. Do you think it will be a boy or girl? He asked one night. I do not know. Does it matter to you? No. Either way, they will be ours and loved. What name should we choose? They spent hours discussing names, drawing from both human and orc traditions. Finally, they settled on two options. Connor for a boy, meaning strong-willed or wise, or Vara for a girl, an orc name meaning fierce protector. The baby arrived in early spring, during a thunderstorm that rattled the cabin walls. Martha served as midwife, having delivered countless babies in her years. Callan paced outside the sleeping alcove, listening to Zurak's labored breathing and occasional cries, feeling utterly helpless. When Martha finally emerged, she was smiling. "You have a daughter. Both mother and child are well." Callan rushed inside to find Zurak exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of Martha's quilts. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Meet Vara," she said softly. He approached slowly, almost afraid to believe this was real. When he looked down at his daughter for the first time, his breath caught. She was perfect, a beautiful blend of both her parents. Her skin was a pale green, lighter than Zurak's but clearly showing her orc heritage. Small nubs protruded from her lower gums where tusks would eventually grow. But her eyes, when they opened briefly, were the same blue-gray as his own. "She is beautiful," he whispered, reaching out to gently touch her tiny hand. Vara's fingers wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. "Hello, little one, I am your father." Zurak shifted to make room for him to sit beside her on the bed. He wrapped his arm around both of them, his wife and daughter, and felt complete in a way he never had before. "We made a person," Zurak said, wonder in her voice. "A whole new person who is part of both of us. We did. And she will be amazing. Look at her parents, after all." Zurak laughed, tired but happy. "We will have to teach her everything, both human and orc ways, so she can choose her own path. She will know she is loved, that is the foundation. Everything else we will figure out together." The days and weeks after Vara's birth brought exhaustion and joy in equal measure. Callan learned to change cloth diapers, to rock a crying baby, to function on minimal sleep. Zurak recovered quickly, her orc constitution helping, and soon they had settled into a routine of sorts. Neighbors came to see the baby, curiosity winning out over prejudice for many. Vara was declared beautiful by Martha, sturdy by Harold, and perfect by Peter's wife. Even those who had been most opposed to the marriage seemed softened by the sight of the innocent child. But Callan knew the relative peace would not last. As Vara grew, she would face questions and challenges they could only prepare her for, not prevent. Still, watching her sleep peacefully in her cradle, he felt nothing but hope. One evening when Vara was 3 months old, Zurak sat nursing their daughter while Callan prepared dinner. She spoke suddenly, her voice contemplative. "Do you ever regret it, pulling me inside that day? Your life would be simpler if you had not." Callan stopped what he was doing and came to sit beside her. "Never. Not once. You and Vara are the best things that have ever happened to me. Whatever difficulties we face are worth it 1,000 times over. Even when people threaten us, even when you lost friends over me." "I did not lose friends. I lost people who were never truly friends to begin with. Real friends like Harold and Martha stood by us." He touched Vara's cheek gently. "And we gained everything that matters. A family, love, purpose. How could I regret that? You are a strange man, Callan Ingram." "So I have been told. Fortunately, I found an equally strange woman willing to marry me." She smiled at that, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter nurse and listening to the spring rain on the roof. Outside, the world continued to turn with all its prejudices and conflicts. But inside the cabin, they had built something pure and good. A family born of chance and choice, of compassion overcoming fear. As summer approached, Callan and Zurak made plans to expand the cabin. With Vara growing quickly, they would need more space. Harold offered to help with the construction, and several other neighbors volunteered as well. It became a community project of sorts, people coming together to help the unlikely family that had settled in their midst. During the construction, an unexpected visitor arrived. An orc, alone and unarmed, approaching with hands raised in a gesture of peace. Zurak tensed immediately, moving to stand between the stranger and her home. The orc woman spoke in the orcish language, and Zurak responded sharply. Callan watched the exchange, understanding nothing but reading tension in every line of his wife's body. Finally, Zurak turned to him. "She is from my old clan. She says she has been searching for me." "What does she want?" Zurak asked, and the answer made her eyes widen. She spoke rapidly in her native tongue, gesturing emphatically, before the other orc bowed low and departed as quickly as she had come. "What was that about?" Callan asked once they were alone again. "She brought a message. The elder who ordered my casting out has died. The new leader, my cousin, has declared the sentence unjust. I am welcome to return if I wish." Zurak's voice was shaky. "My exile is ended." Callan felt his heart sink even as he tried to be happy for her. "That is good news. You are free to rejoin your people if you choose." "If I choose," she repeated slowly. She turned to face him fully. "Do you think I would leave? Abandon you and Vara to return to a clan that cast me out? I would understand if you did. It is your heritage, your culture." "I would never stand in the way." She crossed to him quickly and took his face in her hands. "Listen to me, Callan. My home is here, with you, with our daughter. I chose this life, chose you, and I do not regret it. The clan can keep their belated forgiveness. I have built something better." Relief flooded through him, and he pulled her close. "I am sorry. I should not have doubted. You are human. Doubting is what you do best." But she said it with affection, and when she kissed him, he tasted salt from tears he had not realized he was crying. The incident made Callan think about their future more seriously. Vara would grow up and eventually need to understand both sides of her heritage. Perhaps reconciliation with the Orc clan could provide that, even if Zurak chose not to return permanently. He raised the idea one evening. "What if we visited your clan? Not to stay, but so Vara could learn about that part of herself." Zurak considered it. It would be dangerous. Many orcs would not welcome a human, even one married to their kin. But if the new leader is sympathetic, perhaps. "When Vara is older, when she can understand and choose for herself, we could attempt it." She smiled slightly. "My cousin Thorn was always more reasonable than most. If anyone could make such a visit work, it would be her." It was decided then, a plan for the future. They would raise Vara knowing both her heritages, and when she was old enough, they would journey to the Orc clan so she could see that part of her identity firsthand. Years passed, marked by Vara's growth and the steady improvement of their standing in the community. Vara proved to be bright and curious, asking endless questions about everything. She had her mother's strength and her father's thoughtful nature, a combination that served her well. When Vara was 5, another half-orc child was born to a couple in a neighboring settlement. Then another the following year. Slowly, Callan and Zurak's example had opened doors for others to follow. Interspecies relationships were no longer unthinkable, even if they remained controversial. Father Duncan visited regularly, taking a special interest in Vara's education. He taught her letters and numbers and was impressed by how quickly she learned. "This child has a sharp mind," he told Callan. "She could do great things if given the opportunity." "She will have every opportunity we can provide," Callan promised. When Vara turned 7, they made the journey to the Orc clan. It took weeks of careful travel, and Callan was tense the entire time, hyper-aware of how vulnerable they were. But Zurak's cousin Thorn proved true to her word, welcoming them to the camp and ensuring their safety. Vara was fascinated by everything: running around with orc children who were initially suspicious but gradually accepted her. She learned games and songs, heard stories of orc history and culture, and began to understand the complexity of her heritage. On the final night before they returned home, Thorn spoke with Callan privately. "You have done well by my cousin. I was skeptical when I heard she had married a human, but I see now that it was the right choice. You honor each other." "She saved me as much as I saved her," Callan replied. "We built something good together." "You have. And your daughter is proof that different peoples can coexist if they choose to see each other as individuals rather than enemies." Thorn smiled, her tusks gleaming in the firelight. "Perhaps there is hope for lasting peace yet. Perhaps." One family at a time. They returned home to find their cabin had been tended by Harold and others in their absence. Life resumed its familiar pattern, but Vara had changed. She was more confident in her identity, no longer uncertain about where she belonged. More years passed. Vara grew into a strong, intelligent young woman who served as a bridge between communities. She moved easily between human settlements and orc camps, using her unique position to facilitate communication and trade. Prejudice still existed, but she faced it with the quiet dignity her mother had taught her, and the steady reason her father modeled. Callan and Zurak grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They had faced every challenge together and would continue to do so. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on the hill above their cabin, looking down at the home they had built and the life they had created. "You remember that blizzard?" Zurak asked, leaning against him. "Every detail. The wind, the cold, the shock of finding you at my door." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "Best storm of my life. You pulled me inside and lit every fire. You saved me in more ways than one. We saved each other. That is what we do." She turned in his arms and kissed him, and he responded with the same passion he had felt on their wedding day. Some things never changed, not the important things. They descended the hill together as the sun set, returning to their cabin where Vara was preparing dinner. Their daughter had her mother's skills in the kitchen and her father's tendency to experiment with recipes, which made for interesting meals. "What are you two looking so pleased about?" Vara asked as they entered. "Just remembering how we got here," Zurak said, helping set the table. "The blizzard story again. I have heard it 100 times, and you will hear it 100 more," Callan said cheerfully. "It is a good story. It is a ridiculous story. What are the odds of an orc collapsing at the exact door of the one human who would help her?" "Pretty good, apparently," Zurak said with a smile. "The best things often are ridiculous when you look at them closely." They sat down to dinner together, a family forged from impossible circumstances. Outside, the world continued its slow progress toward understanding. Inside, they had already found it in the simple act of choosing love over fear, compassion over prejudice. Callan looked at his wife and daughter, at the life they had built from that first desperate moment in a blizzard, and felt profound gratitude. He had pulled an orc woman inside from the cold and lit every fire to save her life. In doing so, he had saved his own. The cabin was warm, the food was good, and the people he loved most were beside him. Everything else was just details. This was what mattered. Family, love, home. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.